The smell of salt and fish clung to everything Theo owned. No matter how many times he showered or how much soap he used, the scent followed him like a shadow. At 16, he had grown used to it, almost. Every morning before the sun rose, he would help his father at the docks, sorting through the day's catch with cold, nimble fingers that had long since learned the difference between a good fish and a great one. "This one will fetch a good price," his father would say, holding up a gleaming sea bass, its scales catching the first light of dawn. Theo would nod, already sorting smaller fish into ice-packed crates. This was his life in the small coastal town of Port Haven, where nearly everyone's livelihood depended on what the ocean decided to give. Their apartment sat above his father's fish market on Harbor Street. It was small, but clean, with windows that looked out over the bay. On clear days, Theo could see all the way to the lighthouse at the edge of the peninsula. The rooms always carried the faint smell of the market below, no matter how many candles his father lit or how often they opened the windows to let the sea breeze flow through. Theo's mother had passed away 3 years ago after a long battle with cancer. He still remembered how she would play old records while cooking dinner, swaying slightly to the music as steam rose from pots of fish stew. Her absence left a hole in their lives that neither he nor his father knew how to fill. Instead, they filled their days with work, constant, reliable work that kept their hands busy and their minds occupied. "You're getting faster," his father said one morning as Theo expertly filleted a row of fish, his knife moving in smooth, practiced motions. "Your grandfather would be proud." Theo smiled at the rare compliment. His father wasn't a man of many words, expressing his love through small gestures instead. An extra portion at dinner. A new pair of waterproof gloves when the old ones wore thin, staying up late to help with homework even after a 14-hour workday. At home, Theo washed his hands with lemon juice, trying to remove the fish smell before school. He'd learned years ago that regular soap didn't work. The lemons helped, but never completely. He pulled on a clean shirt, one he kept in a sealed plastic bag to keep it fresh, and grabbed his backpack. "Did you eat?" his father called from the kitchen where he was packing lunch for them both. "I'll grab something at school," Theo answered, though they both knew it was a lie. He wouldn't eat until lunch, too afraid of adding to the smell that already marked him as different. The walk to West Shore High took 15 minutes along the coastal road. Theo usually left early to avoid running into other students. He liked these quiet moments, watching seagulls circle overhead and listening to the waves crash against the shore. Sometimes he would stop at the old pier and sit for a while, delaying the inevitable as long as possible. Today he didn't have that luxury. He'd stayed longer at the market helping his father with a large order. By the time he reached the school, the yard was filled with students hanging out before the bell. Theo kept his head down, weaving through groups of teenagers hoping to become invisible. "Look who decided to join us," a voice called out. "It's Fish Boy." Theo didn't turn around. He'd learned that engaging only made things worse. He quickened his pace, but a hand grabbed his shoulder, spinning him around. "Hey, I'm talking to you," said Blake, a tall boy with perfectly styled hair who seemed to have made it his mission to make Theo's life miserable. "Didn't your daddy teach you any manners?" "Leave me alone," Theo said quietly, trying to pull away. Blake made a show of sniffing the air. "Smells like low tide. Did you fall into one of your fish buckets this morning?" The small crowd that had gathered laughed. Theo felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. "I need to get to class," he mumbled, eyes fixed on the ground. "We should help him out," Blake said to his friends. "Maybe a bath in the fountain would wash away the stink." Theo tensed, preparing to run if necessary, when a sharp voice cut through the laughter. "That's enough." Ms. Rivera, the English teacher, appeared beside them. "Blake, I believe you have somewhere to be. The bell's about to ring." Blake rolled his eyes but backed off. "Just having a friendly chat with my buddy here," he said with a smirk before walking away, his friends following close behind. "You okay?" Ms. Rivera asked once they were gone. Theo nodded, grateful but humiliated. He hated being the kid who needed teacher intervention to survive school. "Don't let them get to you," she said kindly. They're just showing off, it'll pass. But Theo knew better. It hadn't passed in 3 years. It wouldn't pass now. He thanked her anyway, and hurried to his first class, slipping into his seat just as the bell rang. He sat alone in the back corner, his usual spot where he could see everyone but rarely be seen. The morning passed slowly. Theo tried to focus on his classes, but his mind kept drifting back to the incident in the yard. At lunch, he found an empty table near the cafeteria exit, unwrapping the sandwich his father had packed. Tuna fish, of course. His father meant well, but sometimes Theo wished for just a normal peanut butter sandwich like everyone else. He ate quickly, then headed to the library where he could hide until the next bell. The librarian, Mr. Patel, nodded as Theo entered. They had an unspoken agreement. Theo could use the small study room in the back during lunch as long as he helped shelve books once a week. It was a fair trade for a safe place to escape. Alone, in the quiet room, Theo pulled out his phone and earbuds. He scrolled through his playlist until he found what he was looking for, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. As the first notes filled his ears, he closed his eyes and let his fingers move across the desk as if it were a keyboard. Music was his secret, the one thing that belonged only to him. His mother had been the one to introduce him to the piano. She wasn't a professional, but she played beautifully. When Theo was 7, she started teaching him on their neighbor's old upright piano. After she got sick, Theo would play for her, watching her face relax as the music washed over her. After she died, their neighbor offered to let him continue using the piano whenever he wanted. Some days, it was the only thing that kept him going. The bell rang, pulling Theo from his thoughts. He packed up his things and headed to his afternoon classes, keeping his head down and trying to blend into the background. In chemistry, his lab partner Lisa wrinkled her nose when he sat down, but didn't say anything. Theo pretended not to notice, focusing instead on the experiment they were supposed to complete. By the final bell, Theo was exhausted from the constant tension of navigating school. He grabbed his books from his locker and headed out, careful to take the side exit where fewer students gathered. He was almost in the clear when someone bumped into him hard, sending his books scattering across the hallway. "Watch where you're going, fish boy," Blake laughed as he walked past. Theo knelt to gather his things, keeping his eyes down as students stepped around him, some deliberately coming close to his books. A pair of hands appeared, helping collect the scattered papers. "Here," said a quiet voice. It was May, a girl from his math class who usually sat 2 rows ahead of him. She handed him his history notebook. "Thanks," Theo said, surprised. "Blake's a jerk," she offered with a small smile before continuing down the hall. The interaction was brief, but it left Theo feeling slightly better as he made his way home. Maybe not everyone at school was awful. The fish market was busy when he arrived. His father was handling a rush of late afternoon customers, so Theo dropped his backpack upstairs and came down to help. He fell easily into the rhythm of wrapping fish in paper, making change, and answering questions about which catch was freshest. "This came in just this morning," he told an elderly woman who was examining a display of cod. "My dad caught it himself, on the north side of the bay. It's good for baking with lemon and herbs." The woman smiled, impressed by his knowledge. "You know your fish, young man." "He should," his father called over with pride. "He's been helping since he could walk." These moments were when Theo felt most comfortable in his own skin. Here, smelling like fish wasn't a flaw. It was a sign of expertise, of belonging to a proud tradition. Here his hands knew exactly what to do, and his knowledge was valued. After the last customer left, Theo helped clean up the shop. They worked side by side, hosing down counters and storing leftover fish in the large refrigerator. "How was school?" his father asked as they climbed the stairs to their apartment. "Fine," Theo answered automatically. He never shared the full truth about his school days. His father worked too hard to be burdened with problems he couldn't solve. That night after dinner, Theo told his father he was going for a walk. He grabbed his jacket and headed to the community center 3 blocks away. The building was old, but well-maintained, offering various programs for local residents. Theo slipped through the main entrance and made his way to the small music room at the end of the hall. The room was empty, just as he'd hoped. A weathered upright piano stood against the wall. its wood scratched from years of use, but its keys still perfectly tuned thanks to monthly visits from a retired piano teacher who volunteered his services. Theo sat on the bench and placed his fingers on the cool keys. He started slowly with simple scales to warm up, then gradually moved into the piece he'd been practicing for weeks, Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. The powerful chords filled the room as his fingers flew across the keyboard, his body swaying with the music. Here, alone with the piano, Theo wasn't the boy who smelled like fish. He wasn't the quiet kid who sat in the back of the classroom or the target of Blake's cruel jokes. Here he was just a musician, creating something beautiful out of nothing but air and emotion. Here, he was free. As the final notes faded, Theo heard soft clapping from the doorway. He turned, startled to find Mrs. Chen, the center's elderly director, watching him with a gentle smile. "That was beautiful," she said. "You play with such feeling." Theo blushed, uncomfortable with the praise but secretly pleased. "Thank you, I hope it's okay that I'm using the piano." "More than okay," she assured him. "Music should be played, not left in silence." She paused, studying him. "The talent show is coming up at the center next month. You should consider performing." Theo shook his head immediately. "I couldn't. I just play for myself." Mrs. Chen nodded, not pushing further. "The offer stands if you change your mind. Sometimes the gifts we keep hidden are the ones the world needs most." After she left, Theo turned, back to the piano, her words echoing in his mind. The thought of playing in front of others terrified him. Yet something inside him wondered what it would be like to be seen, truly seen, for something other than the smell that followed him everywhere. He began to play again, softer this time, a melody of his own creation that spoke of longing and possibility. Outside the window, the sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Tomorrow would bring more of the same: early mornings at the dock, whispers in the hallway, loneliness at lunch. But for now, in this moment with the piano, none of that mattered. For now, he was exactly where he belonged. The morning sun had barely risen when Theo finished helping his father load the fresh catch into the market's display cases. His fingers were numb from the ice, and the smell of the sea clung to his skin, despite the rubber gloves he wore. He glanced at his watch, just enough time to shower before school. "You're getting faster," his father said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Soon you'll be running this place without me." Theo forced a smile. His father saw the fish market as a legacy, something precious to pass down. How could Theo tell him that he dreamed of something different? That when he closed his eyes at night, he saw himself sitting at a grand piano under bright lights, not standing behind a counter wrapped in the smell of fish? Under the hot shower, Theo scrubbed his skin until it turned red. He washed his hair, twice with lemon-scented shampoo. Still, the smell lingered, faint but unmistakable. He'd learned to live with it, but others hadn't. As Theo walked through the front doors of West Shore High, he felt the familiar weight of eyes turning toward him. The hallway seemed to part slightly, students shifting away as he passed. He kept his gaze fixed on the scuffed tiles of the floor, counting steps to his locker. "Hold your breath, everyone. Fish boys here." Blake's voice carried down the hallway, followed by exaggerated gagging sounds from his friends. Theo kept walking, his face burning. He'd learned years ago that responding only made things worse. Just get to class, he told himself. Just get through today. He slid into his seat in first period history, pulling out his notebook and keeping his eyes down. The desk next to his remained empty. It always did, creating a small island of isolation around him. Mr. Patterson was discussing World War II when the classroom door swung open. Blake sauntered in 20 minutes late, not bothering to look apologetic. "Nice of you to join us," Mr. Patterson said dryly. "Sorry," Blake replied with a grin that showed he wasn't sorry at all. Coach needed to talk about Friday's game. The teacher sighed and pointed to the only empty seat in the room, the one next to Theo. Blake's smile dropped. Can I sit somewhere else? Unless you want to stand for the next 30 minutes? No, Mr. Patterson said, turning back to the board. Blake slumped into the chair, dragging it as far from Theo as possible. This is disgusting, he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. I can't breathe over here. A few students laughed. Mr. Patterson turned around sharply. That's enough, Blake. One more comment and you'll be discussing fishing industries. In detention. The class fell silent. But Theo could feel Blake's glare burning into the side of his face. He kept his eyes fixed on his notebook, where he'd been absently drawing piano keys in the margin. When the bell rang, Theo gathered his things quickly, hoping to escape before Blake. He wasn't fast enough. You cost me my starting position, Blake hissed, bumping hard into Theo's shoulder as they moved into the hallway. Coach says I'm benched for the first quarter on Friday because I was late. That's not my fault, Theo said quietly, trying to move past. Blake shoved him against the lockers. Everything about you reeks. Do everyone a favor and drop out already. A few students slowed to watch, their faces showing a mix of discomfort and cruel curiosity. None of them stepped in. Is there a problem here? Ms. Rivera appeared beside them, her expression stern. Blake immediately backed off, his face transforming into an innocent smile. No problem at all, just having a chat with my buddy. Ms. Rivera looked between them, clearly not believing it. Get to class, Blake. Now. When Blake was gone, she turned to Theo. You should report this. Theo shook his head. It would just make things worse. Not if, please, Theo cut her off. I'm fine, really. Ms. Rivera looked like she wanted to say more, but nodded reluctantly. My door is always open if you change your mind. Theo hurried to his next class, the brief confrontation replaying in his mind. It wasn't just Blake. It was the way no one ever stepped in. The way everyone seemed to accept that he deserved it somehow, as if smelling different was a crime worthy of punishment. At lunch, Theo found his usual corner table in the cafeteria. He unwrapped his sandwich. His father had packed roast beef today instead of tuna, a small kindness that didn't go unnoticed. He had just taken his first bite when he sensed someone approaching. Can I sit here? It was May, the girl who had helped him pick up his books the day before. She was holding a lunch tray and looking at him with a small, uncertain smile. Theo was so surprised he just nodded, not trusting himself to speak without saying something awkward. May sat across from him, setting down her tray. I'm May, by the way. We have math together. I know, Theo said, then felt his face grow warm. I mean, I've seen you in class. I'm Theo. I know, she replied with a hint of amusement in her voice. They ate in silence for a few moments, Theo, struggling to remember how normal conversations worked. It had been so long since anyone had voluntarily sat with him at lunch. I liked what you said in math yesterday, May finally said, about how there could be multiple solutions to the problem. Mr. Zhao didn't seem to expect that. Theo blinked in surprise. He hadn't thought anyone had noticed his comment. Oh, thanks. Do you like math? She asked. It's okay. I like that there are rules that make sense. He hesitated, then added, not like people. May nodded as if she understood perfectly. People are complicated. From across the cafeteria, Theo noticed Blake watching them, his eyes narrowed. Next to him, his girlfriend Kira was whispering something in his ear, both of them staring at May with disbelief. You don't have to sit here, Theo said quietly. People will talk. May followed his gaze, then turned back with a shrug. Let them. I don't care what Blake or Kira think. Why are you being nice to me? The question came out before Theo could stop it. May seemed surprised by his directness. Because you seem interesting, and because I know what it's like to be the outsider. She gestured to herself. New girl who skipped a grade and likes quantum physics for fun. Not exactly winning popularity contests either. For the first time in months, Theo felt himself smile a real smile. They spent the rest of lunch talking about classes, with May doing most of the talking. while Theo listened, slowly relaxing. When the bell rang, they walked together to the hallway before separating for their afternoon classes. "See you tomorrow?" May asked. Theo nodded, still not quite believing this wasn't some elaborate setup for a new kind of humiliation. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Even Blake's taunts in gym class, where he accidentally threw a basketball at Theo's head, couldn't completely dampen the strange lightness he felt. Someone had sat with him at lunch. Someone had talked to him like he was normal. After school, Theo headed to the community center. He had been thinking about Mrs. Chen's words about the talent show all day. He still couldn't imagine performing in front of people, but the idea had planted itself in his mind and wouldn't let go. The music room was empty when he arrived. Theo sat at the piano, running his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them down. Then he began to play, softly at first, then with growing confidence as he lost himself in the music. He was so absorbed that he didn't notice Mrs. Chen enter until she spoke. "That piece," she said. "Chopin's Ballade No. 1, isn't it? It's quite advanced." Theo's hands froze on the keys. "I've been teaching myself from YouTube videos," he admitted, "and from what my mom showed me before she died." Mrs. Chen moved closer, her eyes thoughtful. "You have a gift, Theo. Raw talent like yours is rare." Theo shook his head. "I just practice a lot." "Practice without talent gets you competence. What you have is something more." She sat on a chair near the piano. "I used to teach at the conservatory in the city. I know what I'm hearing." Hope flickered in Theo's chest, quickly extinguished by reality. "It doesn't matter. It's just something I do for myself." "Music isn't meant to be kept to yourself," Mrs. Chen said gently. "It's meant to be shared." "No one wants to hear me play," Theo said, the words bitter on his tongue. "They've already decided who I am." Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment. "When I was young, I lived in a small village in China. My father was the local butcher. I always smelled of blood and raw meat." She smiled at Theo's surprised expression. "Children can be cruel everywhere. They called me butcher girl and held their noses when I walked by." "What did you do?" Theo asked. "I played the erhu, a Chinese string instrument. I played until they couldn't ignore me anymore, until they had to see me as something more than the butcher's daughter." She stood up. "The talent show is in 3 weeks. Think about it." After she left, Theo stayed at the piano, playing softly and thinking about what she had said. Could music really change how people saw him? It seemed impossible. Yet something about Mrs. Chen's story had touched a chord of hope inside him. The next day at school, Theo found May waiting for him at lunch. She was reading a thick book about astrophysics, her lunch half-eaten beside her. "You came," she said, looking pleased as he sat down. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "Wasn't sure." She closed her book. People are unpredictable. They fell into easy conversation, May talking about the documentary she'd watched last night about black holes, Theo mostly listening but occasionally adding something. It felt strange but good to have someone to talk to. Their lunch routine continued for the rest of the week. Theo kept expecting May to realize her mistake and stop sitting with him, but each day she was there, seemingly unbothered by the looks they got or the occasional whispers. On Friday, Blake and his friends walked past their table, deliberately, bumping it hard enough to spill May's milk. "Oops," Blake said with a smirk. "Didn't see you there, Fish Boy." "Oh, and Fish Boy's girlfriend. Guess someone finally found someone desperate enough to sit with them." Theo felt his hands curl into fists, under the table. He could take the insults directed at him. He was used to those, but dragging May into it was different. "Ignore him," May said calmly, wiping up the spilled milk with napkins. "He's just angry because his brain is the size of a pea." Blake's face darkened. "What did you say?" "You heard me," May replied, not looking up from cleaning the table. Blake leaned down, his face close to hers. "You think you're so smart, don't you, hanging out with the school freak? What's wrong? Couldn't make any real friends?" Something in Theo snapped. He stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Leave her alone." The cafeteria grew quiet, all eyes turning toward them. Blake looked momentarily surprised, then laughed. Look who finally found his voice. What are you going to do, fish boy? Smell me to death? Just walk away, Theo said, his voice steadier than he felt. Or what? Blake stepped closer, towering over him. Theo didn't answer. He couldn't. His momentary courage was fading fast under Blake's glare and the weight of everyone watching. That's what I thought, Blake sneered. He turned to leave, then suddenly swung back, knocking Theo's lunch to the floor. Oops, another accident. As Blake and his friends walked away laughing, Theo slowly sat back down, his face burning with humiliation. I'm sorry, he said quietly, to May. For what? Standing up to that jerk? Don't be sorry for that. She handed him half of her sandwich. Here. Theo shook his head. I'm not hungry anymore. May pushed the sandwich toward him anyway. He wins if you go hungry. Theo took the sandwich, touched by the simple gesture of kindness. They ate in silence for a while, the buzz of the cafeteria slowly returning to normal around them. I play piano, Theo said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could reconsider. May looked up, surprised by the non sequitur. Really? Theo nodded. My mom taught me when I was little. I practice at the community center now. Are you any good? I don't know, maybe. He hesitated. Mrs. Chen, she runs the center, thinks I should play in the talent show next month. Are you going to? Theo shrugged, already regretting bringing it up. Probably not. It's stupid. I don't think it's stupid, May said. I think you should. Do it. Why? She looked at him thoughtfully. Because then they'd have to see you, the real you, not just what they think they know. The bell rang before Theo could respond. As they gathered their things, May added, I'd come watch you play, if you wanted. Later that afternoon, Theo found himself back at the community center, sitting at the piano with Mrs. Chen's talent show application form in front of him. His hand hovered over the paper, pen poised to sign his name. What if he failed? What if... They laughed. What if this just gave Blake and the others new ammunition to use against him? But what if May was right? What if for just a few minutes they saw something different when they looked at him? Taking a deep breath, Theo signed his name. News of Theo signing up for the community center talent show spread through West Shore, high like wildfire. He wasn't sure how it had gotten out. Perhaps Mrs. Chen had mentioned it to someone, or maybe he'd been spotted filling out the application form. By lunchtime the day after he signed up, it seemed everyone knew. Is it true? Mei asked as she slid into her now usual seat across from him. You're really doing the talent show? Theo nodded, picking at his sandwich without looking up. I signed up yesterday. That's amazing. Her enthusiasm made him finally meet her eyes. She was genuinely excited for him, which felt strange and wonderful at the same time. I don't know if I can actually go through with it, he admitted. Of course you can. When is it? 3 weeks from Saturday. His stomach churned just thinking about it. I'm already regretting it. What are you going to play? Before Theo could answer, a shadow fell over their table. Blake stood there with two of his friends, his trademark smirk firmly in place. Well, if it isn't the musical fish. Blake leaned against their table. Heard you signed up for the talent show. What are you gonna do, play under the sea while smelling like something that died there? His friends laughed on cue. Theo said nothing, staring down at his lunch tray. Leave him alone, May said, her voice sharp. Blake raised his eyebrows in mock surprise. Defending your boyfriend? That's cute. Didn't know they made fish-scented cologne, but I guess it worked on someone. Why don't you worry about your own talents, Blake? May shot back. Oh wait, being a jerk isn't actually a talent. Blake's smile disappeared. Watch yourself, new girl. You're making the wrong friends. He turned back to Theo. I'll be there front row to see your big performance, fish boy. Wouldn't miss it for the world. After they walked away, Theo pushed his lunch tray aside, his appetite gone. Don't listen to him, May said. He's just trying to get in your head. Well, it's working, Theo muttered. Maybe this was a mistake. It's not a mistake. It's brave. She reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. What were you going to play? You didn't say. Theo hesitated, then answered quietly. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, just the first movement. May's eyes widened. That's really difficult, isn't it? It's what my mom was working on before she got sick. She never got to perform it. He hadn't told anyone that before, not even his father. I've been learning it for the past year. Can I hear you play sometime before the show? The question caught Theo off guard. No one had ever asked to hear him play. I guess if you want. I do want, she said with a smile. How about today after school? That afternoon, Theo felt a strange mix of nerves and excitement as he led May to the community center. They walked, in comfortable silence, May occasionally pointing out birds or interesting cloud formations. This is it, Theo said as they reached the old brick building. Nothing fancy. Mrs. Chen looked up from the front desk as they entered, her face brightening, when she saw Theo. You brought a friend, she said, delighted. This is May, Theo said awkwardly. From school. She wanted to hear me play. Wonderful. The music room is free now. Mrs. Chen beamed at them. I was just about to make tea. Would you like some? Yes, please, May answered for both of them as they walked down the hallway to the music room. Theo felt his palms growing sweaty. It was one thing to play alone, another to have Mrs. Chen overhear him, but something entirely different to play intentionally for someone his own age. The old upright piano sat in the corner, exactly as he'd left it yesterday. Theo approached it slowly, running his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them down. So this is where you come every day, May said, looking around the small room with its faded posters of classical composers and shelves of tattered sheet music. Theo nodded, sitting on the bench. It's quiet. No one bothers me here. May sat in a chair near the piano, watching him expectantly. What are you going to play? I'll start with something simple. He placed his hands on the keys and began to play Debussy's Clair de Lune, a piece he knew well enough that he could play it with his eyes closed. As the gentle notes filled the room, Theo felt the familiar sense of calm wash over him. He forgot about May watching, forgot about the smell of fish that followed him everywhere, forgot about Blake's taunts. There was only the music flowing from his fingers like water. When the final notes faded, the silence felt almost sacred. Theo looked up to find May staring at him, her eyes wide. That was, she began, then shook her head as if words weren't enough. Theo, you're amazing. He felt his face grow warm. It's just an easy piece. Don't do that, she said firmly. Don't dismiss your talent, you play beautifully. Before he could respond, Mrs. Chen appeared with a tray of tea. I heard, she said simply. You've been practicing. They sipped tea while Theo gathered his courage to play the Rachmaninoff piece. It was the most difficult thing he'd ever attempted, full of complex rhythms and dramatic emotional shifts. He'd never played it for anyone before. This is what I'm thinking of playing for the talent show, he finally said, setting down his teacup. It's not perfect yet. Let's hear it, Mrs. Chen encouraged. Theo closed his eyes for a moment, picturing his mother's hands guiding his own over the keys when he was younger. Then he began to play, the opening chords of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the room, dark and brooding. As he moved into the main theme, his fingers danced across the keys, sometimes stumbling over the more difficult passages, but always finding their way back. The music built in intensity, telling a story of struggle and hope and beauty emerging from darkness. When he finished, his hands were trembling slightly and he realized he'd been holding his breath through the final measures. He looked up to find both May and Mrs. Chen watching him with expressions of astonishment. That was? Mrs. Chen started, then paused to collect herself. Theo, that was extraordinary. You missed some notes in the middle section, May said, making Theo wince. Then she broke into a wide smile. But it was still the most amazing thing I've ever heard. How long have you been playing? Since I was 7, he answered. My mom taught me at first, then I just kept learning on my own, from books and YouTube and stuff. You've never had formal lessons? Mrs. Chen asked, surprised. Theo shook his head. We couldn't afford them after Mom got sick. Medical bills and everything. Mrs. Chen set down her teacup with a decisive click. I'm going to help you prepare for the talent show. 3 weeks isn't much time, but we can polish this performance. I can't pay for lessons, Theo said immediately. Did I mention payment? Mrs. Chen raised her eyebrows. Consider it my contribution to the arts in this town. We'll start tomorrow after school. In the days that followed, Theo settled into a new routine. Mornings at the fish market with his father, school, which was slightly more bearable with May to talk to at lunch, then afternoons at the piano with Mrs. Chen, who turned out to be a demanding but encouraging teacher. Again, she would say after he played through a difficult passage, but this time, feel the music in your body, not just your fingers. Or, your left hand is telling a different story than your right. Make them speak to each other. Sometimes May would come to watch his lessons, doing homework in the corner while he practiced. Her presence was comforting somehow, a silent vote of confidence. One afternoon, about a week before the talent show, Theo's father surprised him by showing up at the community center. Dad? Theo said, startled to see him standing in the doorway of the music room. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, his father said, looking slightly uncomfortable. Mrs. Chen called me. Said I should hear you play before the big show. Theo shot Mrs. Chen a betrayed look. She hadn't mentioned calling his father. I didn't know you were still playing, his father continued. You never said anything. I didn't think you'd be interested, Theo admitted. It's Mom's thing, not yours. His father's face softened. Your mother would be so proud of you, son. I'd like to hear you play if that's okay. Throat suddenly tight, Theo nodded and turned back to the piano. He played the Rachmaninoff piece from beginning to end, pouring all his complicated feelings into the music, his grief for his mother, his love for his father, his daily struggles at school, his friendship with May, his fears about the upcoming performance. When he finished, he looked up to find his father wiping tears from his eyes. That was beautiful, his father said gruffly. Your mother is somewhere smiling right now, I'm sure of it. Those simple words meant more to Theo than all the technical praise Mrs. Chen had given him over the past weeks. As the talent show approached, word continued to spread around school. Theo overheard whispers in the hallway, caught curious glances in class. Blake had stepped up his taunting, making piano-playing gestures, whenever their paths crossed and loudly wondering if the judges would be provided with nose plugs. He's just scared, May told Theo as they walked home after a particularly difficult day. He knows you have actual talent, and he doesn't. I'm not sure it's worth it, Theo sighed. Maybe I should just back out. May stopped walking and turned to face him. Do you love playing the piano? Yes, he answered without hesitation. Then it's worth it. She started walking again. Besides, I've already told my parents they have to come. You can't back out now. The night before the talent show, Theo couldn't sleep. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, imagining all the things that could go wrong. What if he forgot the notes? What if his hands froze? What if everyone laughed? But worse than those fears was the question that had been haunting him for weeks. What if he played perfectly and it still didn't matter? What if they still only saw the fish boy, not the musician? He got up and went to the window, looking out at the moonlight reflecting on the bay. Somewhere out there, his father's boat would be heading out soon for the early morning catch. The familiar rhythm of their lives would continue regardless of what happened tomorrow. Yet something had already changed, Theo realized. Whether the performance went well or not, he had taken a step toward being seen differently. By Mrs. Chen, by May, by his father, and most importantly, by himself. For the first time in years, he wasn't just the boy who smelled like fish. He was also the boy who could make something beautiful with his hands. The boy who had found his voice in music when words failed him. Whatever tomorrow brought, that was something no one could take away from him. The day of the talent show arrived with a sky full of dark clouds threatening rain. Theo woke before his alarm, his stomach in knots. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying the Rachmaninoff piece over and over, imagining both triumph and disaster with equal clarity. Downstairs, he found his father already preparing breakfast, a rare occurrence since his dad was usually out on the boat by this hour. "Big day," his father said, sliding a plate of eggs and toast in front of Theo. "Thought you could use a good breakfast." Theo stared at the food, his appetite nowhere to be found. "Thanks, Dad." "Nervous?" Theo nodded, pushing the eggs around with his fork. His father sat across from him, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug. "You know, your mother used to get terrible stage fright." This was news to Theo. "She did? But she always seemed so confident when she played." That was after. Before a performance, she'd be a wreck. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. But the minute her fingers touched those keys, something changed. Like she became part of the music. He took a sip of coffee. "You're the same way. I saw it last week when you played for me." Theo felt a lump form in his throat. "I miss her." "Me too, son. Every day." His father reached across the table and squeezed his shoulder. "She'd be so proud of you. Not just for the music, but for having the courage to share it." The simple words settled something in Theo's chest. He picked up his fork and managed a few bites of breakfast. "I took the day off," his father added. "Thought I'd come watch you practice this afternoon, if that's okay." Theo nodded, touched by the gesture. His father had never taken a day off from fishing, not even when he had the flu last winter. At school, the air felt charged with an unusual energy. Word of Theo's talent show performance had spread beyond his classmates to teachers and even students from other grades. He caught people looking at him with curious expressions as he walked down the hallway. "Hey, piano man," called a senior he barely knew. "Good luck tonight." Theo managed an awkward nod, unsure how to respond to the unexpected support. In English class, Ms. Rivera handed back their essays on To Kill a Mockingbird. When she reached Theo's desk, she smiled warmly. "Excellent analysis, Theo, and good luck at the talent show. I'll be there." By lunchtime, the attention had become overwhelming. Theo retreated to the library instead of the cafeteria, seeking quiet among the shelves of books. He found a corner desk and put his head down, trying to steady his breathing. Hiding? He looked up to find May standing there, holding her lunch bag. "Just needed some space," he admitted. She sat across from him. "Everyone's talking about it, even people who've never spoken to you before. That's the problem." Theo ran his hands through his hair. "What if I mess up? What if I forget the notes? What if you're amazing and they finally see who you really are?" May interrupted. "That's what's really scaring you, isn't it?" Theo stared at her, struck by how well she understood. It wasn't just fear of failure that had his stomach in knots. It was fear of success. Fear of being seen as something more than fish boy, because if that happened, what excuse would he have for all the years he'd spent hiding? "Maybe," he admitted. May opened her lunch bag and handed him half of her sandwich. "Eat, musicians need energy." They ate in comfortable silence until the bell rang. As they gathered their things, May said, "I'll see you tonight, front row." "You're really coming?" "Wouldn't miss it for anything." She hesitated, then quickly leaned forward and kissed his cheek. "For luck," she whispered, then hurried away before he could respond. Theo stood frozen, his hand touching the spot where her lips had been, a strange warmth spreading through his chest despite the nerves. His last class of the day was gym, usually his least favorite hour, made worse by sharing it with Blake. Today, though, Blake was oddly subdued, watching Theo with narrowed eyes but keeping his distance. As they changed in the locker room after class, Theo felt the familiar tension in the air. Blake and two of his friends were whispering and laughing, glancing in his direction. He hurried, to finish changing, wanting to get to the community center for one last practice before tonight. He was almost to the door when Blake stepped into his path. "Big night tonight, fish boy," Blake said, his voice falsely friendly. "Nervous?" "Excuse me," Theo said quietly, trying to move past. Blake blocked his way. "Just wanted to wish you luck. Maybe play something special for you." He nodded to his friends who moved to stand on either side of Theo. Something cold settled in Theo's stomach. I need to go. What's your hurry? We just want to help you prepare. Blake's smile didn't reach his eyes. You know, get you in the right mood for your big performance. Before Theo could react, Blake's friends grabbed his arms. Blake reached into his gym bag and pulled out a plastic bottle filled with dark liquid. What is that? Theo asked, struggling against the grip on his arms. Just a little something to make sure everyone remembers who you really are. Blake unscrewed the cap, and the sharp smell of fish oil filled the air. Borrowed it from the cafeteria. Kitchen. Thought you might miss your signature scent if you got too famous after tonight. Theo's heart pounded in his ears as he realized what was about to happen. Don't, he said, his voice barely a whisper. What's that? Didn't quite hear you, Fish. Boy! Blake stepped closer, the bottle tilted toward Theo's head. I said don't, Theo shouted, surprising even himself with the force of his voice. He wrenched one arm free and shoved Blake hard in the chest, sending him stumbling backward. The bottle of fish oil flew from Blake's hand, its contents splashing across the front of Blake's own shirt and pants. For a moment, everyone froze. Then, Blake looked down at his soaked clothes, his face darkening with rage. You're dead, he snarled, lunging forward. The locker room door swung open. What's going on in here? Coach Wilson's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Blake stopped, mid-lunge, his friends immediately releasing Theo's other arm. Nothing, Coach, Blake said, forcing a smile despite the fish oil dripping from his clothes. Just messing around. Coach Wilson looked between them, his eyes narrowing as he took in the spilled bottle, the wet floor, and Blake's stained clothes. Doesn't look like nothing to me. He pointed at Blake and his friends. You three, my office, now. As they filed past, Blake leaned close to Theo and whispered, This isn't over. Coach Wilson turned to Theo. You okay, son? Theo nodded, though his hands were shaking. Want to tell me what that was really about? Theo hesitated, years of keeping, his head down, warring with the anger still burning in his chest. They were going to pour fish oil on me, before the talent show tonight. Coach Wilson's face hardened. I see. He put a hand on Theo's shoulder. Go on to your practice. I'll handle this. Outside, the threatened rain had started to fall, matching Theo's mood as he walked to the community center. The confrontation in the locker room had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. Would Blake try something else tonight? Would he ever be allowed to be more than what people had decided he was? By the time he reached the community center, he was soaked and miserable. Mrs. Chen took one look at him and disappeared to find a towel. His father, already waiting in the music room, asked what happened. Nothing, Theo said automatically, then changed his mind. Actually, Blake and his friends tried to pour fish oil on me. To make sure everyone remembered I'm just Fish Boy, even if I can play piano. His father's face darkened with anger. That little, it's okay, Theo interrupted. Coach Wilson caught them. He sat heavily on the piano bench. Maybe this whole thing was a mistake. Maybe I should just cancel. Is that what you want? His father asked quietly. Theo stared at the keys, not answering. Because the son I know wouldn't let some bully stop him from doing something he loves. The son I know has more courage than that. I'm tired of fighting, Theo admitted, his voice cracking. I'm tired of always being the outsider, of smelling like fish, of being a joke. His father sat beside him on the bench. I know it's been hard, and I know working at the market isn't what you would have chosen. He paused. Your mother and I always wanted different things for you. College, maybe. A chance to see more of the world than just our little town. You never said anything. Didn't want to push. And after she died, he shook his head. I needed you close. Selfish of me, maybe. It's not selfish, Theo said. I wanted to help. Mrs. Chen returned with a towel and a cup of hot tea. 20 minutes until people start arriving, she said. Do you want to run through the piece one more time? Theo looked at the piano, then at his father, and finally at Mrs. Chen. Despite everything, the confrontation with Blake, The years of bullying, the fear still churning in his stomach. He nodded. One more time. As his fingers touched the keys, the familiar calm settled over him. The music flowed through him, washing away the doubts and fears, reminding him of who he really was beneath all the labels others had given him. When he finished, Mrs. Chen smiled. Perfect. Now go change into your good clothes. Your audience awaits. The community center's small auditorium was packed by the time Theo peeked through the curtains. He spotted his father in the front row next to May and her parents. Ms. Rivera sat a few rows back along with several other teachers he recognized. Even Mr. Patel, the school librarian, had come. And there, in the back row with a sullen expression, sat Blake, apparently not suspended but clearly forced to attend, probably as punishment. Coach Wilson stood nearby, arms crossed, watching him like a hawk. Theo's stomach churned with a fresh wave of nerves. The other performers were milling around backstage, a group of young dancers practicing their routine, an elderly man tuning a guitar, twin sisters rehearsing a song. Mrs. Chen appeared at his side. Remember what we talked about? It's just you. And the piano. Everything else falls away once you start playing. Theo nodded, trying to believe it. The show began. Act after act took the stage, some good, some awkward. All met with enthusiastic applause from the supportive community audience. Theo was scheduled last, the closing performance. As his turn approached, he found himself pacing in the small backstage area, his hands shaking slightly. What if all his practice wasn't enough? What if he froze under the lights with everyone watching? 2 minutes, the stage manager whispered to him. Theo closed his eyes, trying to steady his breathing. He thought of his mother, of how she used to play this very piece, of how her fingers would dance across the keys as if they had minds of their own. He thought of his father taking his first day off in years to be here. He thought of May's kiss, on his cheek, and her words, "What if you're amazing and they finally see who you really are?" And now, our final performer of the evening, came the announcement from the stage. Please welcome Theo Reynolds playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 in C minor. This was it, the moment of truth. As Theo walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinded him. He could make out shapes but not faces as he took his seat at the piano. His hands hovered over the keys. For a heartbeat, he couldn't remember the opening notes. Panic fluttered in his chest. Then, like a lighthouse cutting through fog, he heard his mother's voice in his memory. The music is already inside you. Your hands just need to let it out. Theo took a deep breath, placed his fingers on the keys, and began to play. The auditorium fell completely silent as Theo's fingers touched the piano keys. The first chords of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the room, dark, resonant, powerful. For a heartbeat, Theo felt every eye on him, the weight of their expectations pressing down like a physical force. Then, just as Mrs. Chen had promised, everything else fell away. There was only the music now. His fingers moved across the keys with a confidence that surprised even him. The countless hours of practice, the guidance from Mrs. Chen, the memory of his mother's hands showing him how to position his own, it all came together in this moment. The complex melody flowed through him as naturally as breathing. As he moved into the main theme, Theo closed his eyes, letting the music carry him. He no longer had to think about which keys to press or when. His hands seemed to know on their own. The piece told a story of struggle and hope, of darkness giving way to light, of beauty emerging from pain, a story that mirrored his own journey more than he had realized. From his seat in the front row, Theo's father watched with tears gathering in his eyes. He had always known his son was talented, but this was something beyond talent. This was a gift, raw, powerful, undeniable. Beside him, May sat motionless, barely breathing as she watched Theo transform before her eyes. Even Blake, slouched in the back row with Coach Wilson keeping a watchful eye on him, found himself leaning forward slightly, his planned jeers forgotten as the music washed over him. As the piece built toward its first climax, Theo opened his eyes. Through the bright stage lights, he could make out the audience more clearly now, the stunned expressions, the complete attention focused on his performance. For the first time in his life, people weren't seeing the fish boy, the outsider, the kid who didn't quite fit in. They were seeing him, Theo, in his fullest, truest form. His hands moved faster, the tempo building as the piece grew more complex. There was a moment when his fingers nearly stumbled over a particularly difficult passage, but he recovered so quickly that only Mrs. Chen, watching from the side of the stage, noticed the brief hesitation. The music swelled, filling every corner of the small auditorium. Theo's body swayed slightly with the rhythm, his face expressing every emotion carried in the notes. The yearning, the struggle, the triumph. He was no longer just playing the music. He was living it, breathing it, becoming it. In the audience, Ms. Rivera pressed a tissue to her eyes. She had always seen potential in the quiet boy who sat at the back of her class, but nothing had prepared her for this revelation of hidden brilliance. Next to her, other teachers exchanged glances of astonishment. The piece entered its final movement, building toward the powerful conclusion. Theo's fingers flew across the keys with precision and passion, drawing sounds from the old piano that no one had thought possible. As he struck the final chords, bold, resolute, triumphant, the last note seemed to hang in the air like a spell. For 3 heartbeats after the music ended, there was complete silence. Then the applause began, hesitant at first, then growing, into a thunderous wave that filled the auditorium. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Theo's father was the first to stand, his face shining with pride and tears streaming unashamedly down his cheeks. Theo sat frozen at the piano, overwhelmed by the response. Mrs. Chen had to gently nudge him to stand and acknowledge the applause. As he rose unsteadily to his feet, the cheering grew even louder. He looked out at the audience, at his father wiping away tears, at May jumping up and down with excitement, at his teachers and classmates and neighbors all on their feet for him. And there, in the back row, was Blake, still seated but with an expression of stunned disbelief that gave Theo more satisfaction than any words could have. The applause continued as Theo took an awkward bow. When he straightened, he caught Mrs. Chen's eye. She was beaming at him, nodding as if to say, "I told you so." The stage manager had to come out to quiet the crowd so they could announce the winners. Theo returned to his seat, his hands still, trembling with adrenaline. The other performers patted his back and whispered congratulations as he passed. "The judges have made their decision," the announcer said when the audience finally settled down. Third place goes to the Twin Melodies for their vocal performance. More applause as the twin sisters went to collect their small trophy. Second place goes to the Golden Years guitar solo by Mr. Harold Fletcher. The elderly guitarist made his way to the stage, waving his cane triumphantly. And first place, though I think we all knew this was coming, goes to Theo Reynolds for his extraordinary piano performance. The audience erupted again as Theo, dazed, returned to the stage to accept the trophy. The announcer tried to interview him, asking how long he had been playing and where he had trained. But Theo could barely form coherent answers, still processing what had just happened. As the crowd began to disperse after the show, people Theo had never spoken to before stopped to congratulate him. Teachers he didn't even have classes with praised his talent. Parents of other performers asked if he gave lessons. Through it all, Theo kept looking for 3 faces in particular. He found them waiting by the stage door, his father, May, and Mrs. Chen, all wearing identical expressions of pride. His father reached him first, wrapping him in a bear hug that lifted him off his feet. "Your mother would be so proud," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "I am so proud." May was next, throwing her arms around him without hesitation. "I told you," she said, her eyes bright. "I told you they'd see the real you." Mrs. Chen simply squeezed his hand and nodded, her eyes saying everything words couldn't. As they made their way through the crowd toward the exit, Theo spotted Blake, standing alone near the door, his friends nowhere to be seen. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, neither moved. Then, to Theo's surprise, Blake gave a small, almost imperceptible nod before turning and walking away. It wasn't an apology, not even close, but it was an acknowledgement. Something had shifted tonight, not just in how others saw Theo, but in how he saw himself. Outside, the rain had stopped and stars were visible between breaks in the clouds. People were still talking excitedly about the performance as they walked to their cars. Theo heard his name mentioned over and over, no longer paired with whispers or laughter, but with words like talented and amazing and did you know he taught himself? What do you think about ice cream to celebrate? His father suggested as they walked toward their truck. Can May come? Theo asked. Of course, his father said, smiling at May. Mrs. Chen, too, if she'd like. As they drove to the only ice cream shop in town that stayed open past 9, Theo sat in the back seat next to May, the trophy cradled in his lap. Through the window, he could see the ocean in the distance, moonlight dancing on the waves. How does it feel? May asked quietly, just for him to hear. Theo thought about it. Different, he finally said. Like I'm still me, but also more. She nodded as if she understood perfectly. You always were more. Now everyone else knows it, too. At the ice cream shop, the owner, who had been at the talent show, refused to let them pay. On the house for our town's piano prodigy, he insisted, adding an extra scoop to Theo's sundae. As they sat at a corner table, Mrs. Chen leaned forward with an excited gleam in her eye. I've been thinking, she said. The music program at West Shore. High is terrible, practically non-existent. But what if we started a proper piano program at the community center? With your performance tonight, I bet we could get funding from the town council. What does that have to do with me? Theo asked, though he already had a suspicion. You could help teach the younger children, Mrs. Chen said. And she hesitated, exchanging a glance with Theo's father. I've spoken with a colleague at the conservatory in the city. He'd like to hear you play. There might be scholarship opportunities. Theo nearly choked on his ice cream. Scholarship for music? His father nodded. It's what your mother would have wanted. And after tonight? Well, it's clear where your gift lies. But what about the market? Theo asked. I can't just leave, you with all the work. Don't worry about that, his father said firmly. We'll figure it out. Your job now is to see how far this talent can take you. Later that night, as Theo set his trophy on the dresser in his small bedroom, he caught a whiff of fish on his hands. Faint, but still there, despite the thorough washing he'd given them, after the market work that morning. For the first time in years, the smell didn't bother him. It was just a part of his story, not the whole of it. Tomorrow, people at school would look at him differently. There would be new expectations, new challenges. Blake might even find new ways to try to cut him down. But something fundamental had changed tonight. Theo had shown everyone, and more importantly himself, that he was more than they had assumed, more than the limitations they had placed on him, more than even he had dared to believe. He sat on the edge of his bed and opened his phone to find dozens of notifications, messages from classmates who had never spoken to him before, friend requests, even a text from the music teacher at West Shore. Hi, asking if he'd consider playing at the winter concert. The last message was from May. Told you so. See you tomorrow, piano man. P.S. You still smell like fish, but now it's kinda charming. Theo laughed out loud, a sound of pure joy that seemed to echo his mother's laugh from years ago. He set the phone aside and lay back on his bed, replaying the performance in his mind. The fear, the music taking over, the moment when everything else fell away. For years he had tried to escape who he was, the fisherman's son, the boy who smelled of the sea, the outsider looking in. Tonight, he had finally found the key to a different door. Not escape, but transformation. Not hiding, but revealing something that had been there all along, waiting to be discovered. Tomorrow would be a new day. Tomorrow, he would walk into school not as Fish Boy, but as Theo Reynolds, pianist. And whatever came next, the conservatory, teaching at the community center facing Blake and the others, he would face it with his head held high, because tonight he had played the piano and made them cry. and in those tears he had found his freedom.